see, something's going to happen.
What? What's going to happen?
Something wonderful.
What?
I understand how you feel. You see, it's all very clear to me now.
Welcome to the Occult Rejects. Today's episode, we got a very special guest, somebody I was very excited to come on the show to talk about tarot. You all know I love tarot. But before we introduce Nitasia Roland, let's introduce the other rejects on the show. And first, we got the Loon, Judith. What is going on, Judith? How are you?
Hi, I'm the Loon. You could catch me on the Loon on YouTube and on as the Loon on X. And I do the weekly brunch and once a month the buddy check. And I try to focus on inner self development.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you making it today. And Jin the Ninja, what is going on, sir? How are you?
Well, thank you. What's up, boss? Mr. 93. I'm really excited to be here. I'm not a tarot guy. Just let me say that. Everything I know is newer, although I've been doing it since I was 14. Like, I've had a Thoth deck for all that time, and I'm a grown in age now, so I should know something, but I don't really know anything, but that's okay. But if you're interested in following me, you can follow me right now at the show account at Threshold Saints, both on IG and Twitter. Yes, my personal account is just temporarily, we're just taking a little hiatus, but you can also catch us on thresholdsaints.substack.com, as well as The True Grey Lodge, of which Matt Murrah is our webmaster and our YouTube coordinator, of course. So our The True Grey Lodge with a V, TRVE, and you can look at all of our episodes with each other and that we do as a group. And so we just did a great episode on the relatives of apocalypse. So indigenous ways of relating in an apocalyptic time. So kind of cool, kind of different for us, but I think it went well. People said they loved it. So that was our latest episode. And then next week I have Sochki, who is a physicist, a Kabbalist, a rock and roller. Well, he says he's a rock star, so I'll go with that. But he's kind of like he's a magician for the new aeon. So he is kind of wild, and you hear us in conversation for like 8 hours. I cut it up, so it's different episodes, but the first part of that will be coming up next week. So thank you guys so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Jin. And I wouldn't feel too bad. I probably have about 4 tarot decks, and I really don't know anything about it unless I attribute it to the Kabbalistic tree of life. Like, that's the only way it says anything to me, so I get it. Brandon, Magus in the Media. What is going on, sir?
Sup there, everyone. Thank you for having me on again, Nick. As always, love coming on and being one of the rejects of the occult. It's beautiful. Nice. I am Brandon, right? This is Magus in the Media. That's where everyone should go to. This is actually the Occult Rejects. Magus in the Media integrates with it. Please, everyone, just go check out all the things that I've been doing. It's on YouTube. That's the biggest channel. And then X is where I get to just kind of flippantly talk shit to all the nonsensical people out there, as well as Instagram to drop all my shorts and reels, and then TikTok. It's a dying app, but we use it anyway. So we as in me breaks down media of all kinds, film, anime, literature, comic books, through the esoteric, mythological, everything that comes out of my brain. And I love everyone on here. I'm so excited to talk to Nitasia, Roland. It's going to be a great day. Tarot is amazing. So let's do it.
All right. Thank you very much, sir. I appreciate it. And last but not least, my man, Matt Moore. What is going on, sir?
Sup? How's it going?
All right. Good. How are you?
So very glad to be here. Shame I couldn't join the last 2 episodes, but it was nice to hear them as well. It was super nice hearing them. I'm Matt Mora. You can always find me as at MattMora19 on all socials. That's going to be Twitter, YouTube, TikTok, Twitch, maybe some Instagram, maybe some other place like Telegram or whatever. You can always find me there. I do enjoy tarot very much. I had the 72 weeks experiment that I posted on X. And it's also on my website, which is Kabbalah.com, KAABALAH.com. So that's what I like to do. I like to use Kabbalah, not the Jewish one, not the Hermetic one. Not against any of those, but just people get that confused all the time. But I like to connect that with tarot, with astrology, with numerology, with other sciences, and it's just so cool. So it's awesome to be here talking about it with someone who just released a tarot deck, or it's going to release a tarot deck in the future. So that's going to be super nice.
Thank you very much, sir. I appreciate you making it. And finally, Nitasia, Roland, thank you very much for making it on. And yes, she's the founder of Urania Press. She's which is an esoteric publishing studio where poetry, myth, and divination come together. Nitasia is a writer and independent researcher with a background in book arts and design, and she's been a tarot reader for decades. Today we'll be talking about her Emblemata tarot deck, and we'll also touch on a little bit and promote a little bit about her tarot Chimera that Weiser was so nice enough to send me a free copy of, even though we weren't talking about that today. So, Nitasia, anything that I left out that you would like to promote or plug, please let everybody know where they can find you and your amazing tarot decks and anything else you'd like to show people.
Thank you. It's great to be here and get to know you all. Let's see. So, yes, I started Urania Press in 2020, right during the pandemic. And since then, I guess it's been, 5 going on 6 years, I've created 9 decks. So some of them are, like just stayed indie decks with Urania Press that I had funded through Kickstarter campaigns and got to have, like followers that way. And so the decks were being promoted. And then, like each new campaign that I did, I had, people from before. And so it kind of rolled. And yeah, now I've got 9 decks out there and 3 of them have been taken on by the publishers Weiser, as you mentioned. The first one they put out was my Tarot Emblemata, which my indie deck was called Chromata, which was a colorized version of the Claude Peridin devices and emblems. And then after that, actually, no, I'm sorry, they did Star Lore Arcana first, which is an antique deck of constellations. And then they did the Emblemata. And now, February 2nd, they're releasing Tarot Chimera, which was my first indie deck that I published with Urania Press. And that's the noir art of the symbolist artist Roland. And you can find me at uraniapress.com. I'm on Instagram, Nitasia_Roland, or Urania_press. And then I also have a blog, but I don't keep it up to date. So sorry about that. But there's some bits and pieces on there.
Awesome. Thank you.
And that's a Squarespace, Synthemata, and Symbola.
Awesome. Well, I'll make sure if you want, after the show, you can send me all those links and I'll make sure they're in the show notes.
Yeah, that would be great. I'll put the notes in.
Yeah, it would help. Thank you very much again for coming on. Like I ask, I guess, every guest that comes on for the Occult, which is pretty much all of them. What was it, I guess, or when was it? Like, when did you know, like, this is what I was going to get into? How did you end up getting yourself into this, I guess, life?
Yeah, I think it's kind of an interesting trajectory of experience, really, because I was sort of what I consider heavily steeped in my early 20s. And then my 30s and 40s, I got into motherhood and more sort of arts and crafts, and kind of like let a lot of my earlier interests and obsessions lay low, and can't really explain why, except for I really did enjoy being in. I have 2 daughters, so but yeah, so in my early 20s, I find that Roland, actually, that artist inspires me so much because his work that I saw when I was in art school in the 90s made such an impression on me because it had a dark flavor and because it was so spirited and it seemed like it was full of the numinous experience, And so I found that I was really drawn, as far as esotericism goes, like the flavors of it came out through my interest in art. So like dark art, and symbolist artwork in particular, and like even sort of the pre-Raphaelites to some extent, just because they were hearkening back to myths and archaic times and classical times. And so really like what embodies the esoteric for me in a lot of ways has to do with myth and archetypes and imagery. And then obviously, like when you look at, say, symbolist or even pre-Raphaelite artwork, there's a sense of the magic in that, right? And so it's like, the combining of imagery, and then like a lot of symbolist artists were also writers, and they were pretty decadent. And so I got into that sort of era, the symbolist era, with art, which I could just, like, even when I studied them a little bit by reading some of the books, because I worked at the library and art school, like I could tell that they were, they weren't like out and out saying they were like, into the esoteric, but they were obviously inspired by it, So magic and mysticism has always been a part of my life. I've always been drawn to it. But as I said, so like in my early 20s, I lived in Ireland for 3 years, and I spent a lot of time reading tarot and just, keeping journals of all my tarot journeys and spreads. And then I felt the need and desire to get into like a master's program to express myself a bit more. And I was really into book arts and poetry and wanted to combine my interests in art and writing. So I moved back to the States and did a interdisciplinary kind of degree. And in that, I was able to combine like art and poetry. So I did a printmaking studio and then made artist books with poetry. And I would say a lot of that work had like a mystical flavor. So long story short, I feel like I've always been sort of a mystic person and into the metaphysical. And a lot of it came from poetry and art for me. And then I kind of shied away from like some of the real, you could say like fan or trends of, like witchcraft and things like that. But when the whole time I was in Ireland, I was doing like hedge witch stuff and, like little spells and things. But I didn't really get sort of steeped in magic per se until my late 40s. And so, like I said, in between 20s and late 40s, I had children. So that took up a lot of my life, just kind of making their lives enchanted. And then I did some craft businesses just to kind of make some money. And how tarot came about as far as publishing goes was when COVID struck, my full-time job, I was let go, like a lot of people were laid off, and I was able to get unemployment. So I was supported and I was at home. And I've told this story before if anyone's heard any of my interviews, but I was looking through a old book where I had Xeroxed a bunch of artwork from my early 20s, like when I was working in the library at art school, and like just kind of scamming on all kinds of imagery, probably even some stolen books, I don't know. But anyway, I had like cut and pasted all kinds of great stuff into this journal. And I saw this Odilon Radon image that just made me think, wow, that would make like a perfect tower card. And then funny enough, a friend of mine had sent me a template for creating a tarot deck. And I was thinking, I didn't even know you could just do this, just, like wing it and make your own deck. And so because I don't really love to draw or paint myself, I've always been obsessed with like curating images. And a lot of my decks are about that. So they're like finding obscure imagery out there in the public domain and sometimes even antique decks. And because I have like a experience in Photoshop where I co-taught with some masters, Photoshop is something I love to work in. And I love to kind of like what they call paint with light. And so light and shadow. And so anyway, I was thinking, well, I'm just going to like take Odilon Radon's artwork. And little by little, I saw that they were really corresponding with what would be considered the traditional Rider-Waite Smith style, And so I created that deck and found out about Kickstarter being like the industry standard for getting, like a funding for something like a deck. And a lot of people mostly just buy their decks through Kickstarter nowadays and they're indie decks. So that's what I did. And I put that one out and that was the beginning of it all.
That's awesome. Nice. Thank you.
But yeah, I mean, like, I know your question was about like esotericism and magic and all of that. So like, I would say that, it's always been embedded in my spirit, but I didn't get heavily steeped into ritualizing it and practicing until my late 40s. And that was because I had a sort of, you could say like I met some influences that made it all make sense for me, for seeing that it was authentic and not just like a fad.
Did you want to ask something, Jim?
Yeah, I'm just going to say that I identify with the curation of images rather than particularly being an art producer on your own. I'm also like that, so I understand. I wanted to ask you about Urania Press and why Urania, because as we've often discussed on the show and my shows and all the shows that we do, very broadly, is we've called, well, at least I call it the Aeon of the Daughter. So I know Urania is a daughter, so I just wanted to know if that, like, who is that for you, and why did you decide to name your press that?
Yeah, so Urania as the muse, when I was looking into her, because I had notions that I wanted to do something with astrology, but I'm not a professional astrologer. I'm an enthusiast, and I just kind of study it on my own, and I look at my chart and I just deep dive. But when I was looking at the muses, Urania was not only the muse of astronomy, but she's also like a muse of poetry. I mean, there are other muses of poetry, but that was also listed for Urania. And because I'm an Aquarius and I'm, also like a Capricorn rising, I have Saturn obviously very heavy in my chart. And Saturn is, she's the daughter of Zeus, right? And then of course the granddaughter of Saturn and the great granddaughter of Uranus. And Uranus is my ruling planet. So Urania made sense for me, even though I'm not like a professional astrologer, but I knew that I would be bringing some decks out of obscurity, like the Star Lore Arcana deck came out. And also I did Astronomia, which was another deck that had to do with like planets and asteroids. And so, yeah, I knew I would be publishing some work in that vein, but not all the work. So it doesn't have to really pigeonhole me.
Just a quick follow-up. That was great. I agree with all of that. I think it's in a quote-unquote Aquarian age, so very fitting. But I also, I wonder if the symbologists, like from an art history perspective, yes, of course, it's not necessarily what you would call metaphysics per se, but I would posit that all the work of a symbologist is basically Kabbalah. And many people on this panel would probably agree with me. And so looking at Odion's work, I think that you're right in seeing that there are correspondences to the Rider-Waite deck, because as Nick said, like for someone like me who's not a tarot reader, the deck only makes sense in relationship to the Kabbalistic tree, because all the cards are supposed to represent paths or path workings or Sephirotic concepts. So that's where the images arise. So I also saw it right away, just in pre-recording, because his deck is heavily laid with what I would call Kabbalistic themes. Now, I'm not expecting you to call it that, but if you want to address that in any way, I'd appreciate it.
No, I have not actually looked at that. I haven't. I mean, if anything, it would just be kind of synchronous because it all ties in mystically, but I haven't spent any time with that concept. So sorry about that. But I'd love, I mean, if you want to elucidate some more on it, feel free.
Well, even his concept of the severed head is actually a symbol of I'm a Tibetan Buddhist, so I generally use tantric astrology or Puranic stories to sort of relate metaphysical concepts, but I'm very comfortable using like traditional Jewish Kabbalah as well. But one of the ideas of like the Aquarian age in Tantra is the severed head. So there's even a goddess called Chinnamastika. She with the severed head. She severs her own head, in fact. But she's kind of the bearer of the Aquarian or the Uranian age. So his work obviously deals with this figure, the severed head image, and we obviously looked at the magician card pre-recording, and there is the skull. So very Saturnian, the ruler of bones, the last density before we lose form. And then there was also a head, I believe, in the basket. So it's like both his ego, his physical body, and then what is looking at it. Well, I would argue that it's his spiritual self.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, it makes me think of that whole idea of like the disembodied head, for sure is more about, for me, like, non-materialism and like that ability to kind of like take yourself away from the ego and the body in that regard, and dive deeper into dreams and the surreal and the imagination. But yeah, I know that's definitely a theme that you see often with his work.
Yeah, nice. I also want to add, or like kind of bring out the idea of the severed head. We've maybe heard it from the same thing as like John the Baptist, right? The Gnostics or the Templars were said to have had the head of John the Baptist, which would mumble out glossolalia to you. And if you had the right level of initiation, you would be able to hear the words, which may stem from and be the similar thing to the lost keys of Freemasonry. Interesting enough.
Yeah, and then of course there's the head of Orpheus, the muse.
Exactly.
So it's all tied in. I mean, it's certainly archetypal, and the symbolism is definitely broad. And it's great to hear of that Eastern tradition too with that.
Nitasia, do you subscribe to like putting the tarot on the Tree of Life? Like, is that something you look at, or?
Well, it's funny because I think I spread myself all over the place. And so I've been actually careful not to go towards Kabbalah. And I know, and the reason why is because it would just take me into a deep dive that I have not wanted to do. It's just like, I don't know, like there's only so much that I can take on for myself that is like, Hellenistic household worship and, the myths and mysticisms of, like Western esoteric magic. And I know that the Kabbalah is huge, but I haven't felt drawn to it because it's going to be too much of a deep dive for me that I just haven't, it just hasn't drawn me. I know that sounds probably crazy to all of you because I know that I've listened to some of your podcasts and you definitely go there. But I haven't. And I think it's just because it's too much for me to take on.
I just want to add a little thing is where it doesn't actually, I think you would agree that when you tap in, because you're not a dabbler, right? You didn't do these things to dabble. You were tapping into an artistic current. Mm-hmm. And that artistic current then means that you are becoming your own magician when you tap into those things, thus pulling, as Carl Jung would say, these metaphors, myths, and symbols from the unconscious realms. And so you didn't need to actually study it per se. Mm-hmm. But through your ritual of artistry, you were tapping into a similar current as then what you're talking about with Eidolon, right?
Yeah, and I know like you can take the tarot and just do any of that with it, like Damien Eccles has done it with the angels, mm-hmm. and you can just take tarot and you can apply any science and any mysticism to it. So that's just one that I haven't done because, as I said, it's just more of like I realized that it would be too much of a deep dive for me that hasn't felt aligned. But I mean, I'm sure like, you're saying it is aligned, but I haven't felt that it's needed for me.
Yeah. Yeah. And only that it's aligned in that you're doing what great shamans, magicians, mystics have done throughout all of history instead of because we live in a strange time where now we have the ability to look up all the different significances and attributes and see how they align from what the Golden Dawn did with Hermetic Kabbalah and adding it all together. But for a long time, everyone was so scattered and across the globe. So you didn't actually have the ability to maybe read from all these great libraries as we do today. So it's kind of, you're taking on that current without,
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, in my early 20s, that was the thing. Like I saw the Tree of Life and I wanted to dabble in it. And then I realized like, no, I don't want to just
get
dabble.
lost.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that'll fry your brain.
Yeah, sorry, Nick. I'm curious, Natasia, since you like the Greek mythology and tarot, have you ever used or encountered the Mythic tarot from?
I have seen it online, and actually, that's one that I have on my list, but I haven't. I don't own it.
You should take a look. It's very nice.
I think that deck particularly, I have heard people say is just like their kind of standard deck. So some people.
Yeah, for reading that's the one I use the most because it's just so easy, especially on the West, since people know the Greek stories and myths, to explain stuff through just like the imagery and symbology. And it's nice how they all connect and so on. And all the minor arcana are also from myths. So like the cup are from Eros and Psyche. The swords is from Orestes, or whatever. How is it in English? The ones are from Jason, and the pentacles are from Midas. No, not Midas. From the father of Icarus. Forgot his name right now. But anyways, so there's always like the myth also through the ace to the 10, and then all the other obviously are connected and so on. So very nice.
Did you say Jason as in the Argonaut?
Yes.
Oh yeah. Okay, that sounds great. I love that.
Yes.
To riff off Matt's point is that the mythological narrative, Nitasia, is one layer of Kabbalah. Like him just even telling you the story, he's drawing you through a Kabbalistic narrative. Like he's drawing you through the tree. And then so for me, who is driven by myth, but I would say more an experiential Kabbalist, for me, it's colors and words. So I relate to, perhaps like you, to words as magic, words as both a container of a narrative, or can contain a narrative maybe, as well as inherently magical in and of themselves. So that's really all Kabbalah is. It's just a series of like ways that we understand the correspondences, usually with words. So a poet is very well positioned to also be to create magic. Now, whether that person believes themselves a magician or not, obviously every great magician, they say, or most of the ones I've ever met, or the ones that from history, like Austin Osman Spare is like obviously the perennial example, because he was a poet, an artist, and a magician at the same time.
Ultimate weirdo.
An ultimate weirdo, an ultimate outsider.
Ultimate outsider, yeah.
Exactly. So there's a joke that we talk about on our group show, is that every magician is in fact a word cell, which is a very Twitter online kind of word, but it makes perfect sense, because the ways you tell stories is very magical. Like how you like what symbols you use to relay specific conceptual ideas. That's going to give people, maybe they won't believe in the wholesale sort of like components of it, but even if they take one element and then they say, oh, I'm going to utilize this for magic, like they do with H.P. Lovecraft very often.
I'm curious also to understand, how do you approach the tarot readings? As in, there are a lot of people, for example, who would get a reading done and then assume that's like a sentence. That's like, okay, that's the story that I'm telling you, and that's the sentence for how it's going to play out. And some other people, like how I prefer to do it, for example, is show them like, hey, this is where your head is at the moment. And if you want to, live that story, good for you, go live it. If you want to change that story a little bit, you can go this way, that way, and so on. So more like as a map that you can navigate, instead of, again, a sentence, or I don't know, maybe other creative ways of using
fixed stories. Sometimes they give you fixed stories.
Yeah.
I think that's what you're kind of saying.
Yeah, I like the idea of the map. I think of it as like, for me, like developing a mythos, a personal mythos. And so I love to use a bunch of different decks. So like I only pretty much clarify my questions or my spreads with my decks, just because I like to use others' decks and not just be all about me and my things that I've created. But I do really resonate with a few of my decks very strongly, and I think they are potent and talismanic. So I definitely use them. And so how I work is I don't tend to do like any traditional spreads like the Celtic Cross or anything like that. Although obviously I learned it originally in my early 20s, but just what I do now, it's more effective for me to just kind of like end up with a table full of cards that are all over the place. And I usually, what I do is I start with like a past, present, and future Rider-Waite-Smith kind of pull. And then I start asking more questions and developing what I call like clarifiers with other decks, my decks and things. And so I feel like it's a deep dive in a lot of ways, and I also get my pendulum out sometimes and ask yes or no questions and things like that. Because my pendulum is just like freaking unbelievable. So it's just aligned with me. It's got that, what they call like the Inges spirit, in it. So it's alive. And it helps me a lot with like the yes or no, but you can't do yes or no with like tarot. So you've got to really develop a storyline to follow. And, you know, like those branches will go from there. They'll go down or they'll go up and side to side, you know. So it's pretty awesome.
I would like to ask then, I think it's kind of a good base question is then what does the tarot mean to you and how do you see it play out in your world as well as the world at large?
It's just another tool or device for me because actually even before tarot, like when I was, you know, say 16, 17, I was writing poetry. I was writing lyrics because I wanted to be in a band. And then I got in a little like garage band playing the Roland synthesizer. So I was writing lyrics early on and then heavily got into poetry, like heavily, like discovered, believe it or not, through Percy Shelley, the romance. So I was really into the romantics.
Nice.
Still am. And then I got into like the decadent writers of the symbolist era. And anyway, so tarot for me is just another divination oracular tool. And so how I feel about it now that I've, you know, like I'm in my 50s, right? So I'm like, really thinking about all of these paths that I've gone down through my life and different avenues I've taken, like even like the mothering thing that I talked about earlier, you know, and how I kind of slipped away from, you know, like magic and esoteric things then. But, and that was, in a lot of ways, that was for me to realize certain things about myself and my path. And so tarot and the oracular tradition for me goes back to like Apollo and the muses and the soul's ability to connect with the daimon and to divine what, you know, like what is important in their lives and what can enrich their lives and how they can become more embodied and more sovereign. So the tarot is a great tradition out of, you know, the Renaissance, but for me, it's also just a tool. So I can use other tools too. And I used to do the I Ching quite a bit, but I won't go into it right now, but I did do that for years as well.
Nice.
And I mean, obviously I love to like read different books from, you know, like who have, you know, written about tarot and, you know, like Jodorowsky and Rachel Pollack. And yeah, there are definitely explorations that can take people in different directions with the tarot itself. But really, it's just a building block / tool for self-discovery. And, you know, like you could call it like, you know, fortune telling. I don't really like to call it that because, you know, you could get a reading from it, which could be pretty inspirational, but then something could turn on a dime.
Yeah, definitely.
And so you could just obsessively go back and do more tarot spreads, you know, but at some point a person needs to, and that's what happened with me is that I read for 3 straight years in Ireland and then I just stopped for years because I just got like inundated with it and I just didn't want to, it didn't have any meaning until it came back to me in my late 40s. And then the spirit of the decks really began to like show up. And not to say that they weren't there in my early 20s when I was in Ireland, because I'm sure they were. It's just I didn't connect. I didn't know it, you know. Whereas now I work with gods. I know the presences of gods. And like when I meditate, I know when entities are speaking and when it's just my head or my psyche. You know,
oh, yeah. I mean, that's a great distinction. I think that a lot of dabblers in the occult and magic tend to forget is that there's these realms of the personal conscious where it's like, what is the difference between the phantasmagoria and just pure your personal imagination?
Yeah, absolutely. And that phantasmagoria is pretty amazing as well. And you can construct that creatively into something to suit your life as well, you know?
Yeah, definitely.
That's definitely the flux that. Oh, no. Sorry, Nitasia.
Oh, no, you go ahead.
I was just saying that is the phantasmagoria. I call it the flux. Every magician has their own vocabulary, right? Like their own way of speaking of it colloquially. I call it the flux. So it's like what we draw from that is in that. And then what we can make of it obviously every artist and magician both is always wants to make something of it. So that's a big part of it. But I wanted to actually one comment and one sort of follow-up question. It's interesting that you bring up the Jodorowsky book, because when Nick had Cherry Para on, who did the Left Hand Path Tarot book, she cited that book as one of her 2 inspirations. And I also find that book very I find his work like incredibly inspiring. And we discussed how it like connects to his cinema work as well as his like comic book work with Mobius, and it's all kind of tarot and Kabbalah and magic, like it's all meta magical together. So that's really interesting. But then you have one of your decks that you mentioned was Sublime Thresholds. So my show's called Threshold Saints. So obviously that's going to catch my attention. So Sublime Thresholds, I wanted to ask about the name and if you wanted to go into that deck a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So back really quickly about Jodorowsky, one of the things that I loved about his vision was that tarot was a sacred temple. And I think a lot of people, maybe, in the early days of, working with tarot might not necessarily see it as that or like a way, like a journey in a way and like a hero's journey kind of thing. And that's definitely something that I see tarot as, just to kind of finish off that inspiration for tarot. But okay, so for Sublime Thresholds, that came about because, let's see. So in 2017 to 2019, I did a master's degree in creative writing. And I had to put together a thesis. And I've always, like I mentioned, have been into the decadent and writers and symbolists. And so I felt like what I loved about art the most was its enchanted quality that made me feel a sense of the sublime. And so I decided that the sublime was still around, because a lot of, like, someone even wrote, I forget the name of the person, that the sublime was dead. And I'm thinking, fuck no. And in fact, humans will be dead when the sublime becomes dead.
Oh, for sure.
And so anyway, for me, these sort of heightened experiences in either writing, poetry, or art are everything. It's kind of like the Eros principle, Eros, E-R-O-S. And so I wanted to explore, and for that degree, it had to do with literary things. So it's the endurance of the sublime in literary horror. And then this whole movement called the eco-sublime. And so that's what I wrote my thesis on, and that sat around for a few years afterwards, obviously. And then when I was thinking about a new project to do with Urania Press to publish, I was thinking how cool it would be to, there's just so much beautiful artwork out there in the public domain, and a lot of it could easily correspond with tarot archetypes and like the hero's journey. And so I wanted to portray art that I felt like took you up to that threshold. Mm-hmm. And obviously, like the wander amongst the fog of Caspar David Friedrich is like one of the most famous imagery of, like, the man standing on the cliff with the rolling, fog and clouds overlooking that, like, that's so like either 2 or 3 of wands, So, I mean, sublime imagery corresponds pretty easily with a tarot deck in that journey. So that's when I just decided to put that together. And I ended up, staying up to like 3 a.m, like just doing super deep dives, looking at over like 4,000 images in the public domain. And even though some of them are quite familiar images, I put them in because I felt that they worked. But I wasn't just grabbing whatever. I mean, I was really like, I spent so much time curating those. Like I said, over 4,000 images, just to get the ones that I felt were right. And that, of course, is artwork that's, like either Gothic, symbolist, or Baroque.
Nice.
Natasha, maybe we should define symbolist just for people who don't have an art history background, because I'm just thinking to myself, like, what if people don't actually know what that word means? Not that, I mean, I know what that word means, and of course you do, but just in case, just because I feel like it's a lesser known movement.
Yeah, so the symbolists of pretty much like the late 1800s, they call it like the fin de siècle. They were mostly English, there's some German and French, and they were French. And their art recalled like back to like classical times and myth, and they loved, you know, like Arthurian myths and stories, and they definitely were against rationalism and realism. And so, of course, they also loved the Romantics. And so they kind of harkened back to the magic and mystical, really, in art. That's my quick definition of it. They also, I think, spent a lot of times in dream and you know, working through their imagination, fantasy, and the phantasmagorical. Yeah.
One thing I did want to ask, well, there's a couple of things I wanted. One thing I wanted to mention that I noticed from you using, I guess, the I Ching tarot and a pendulum, I see you rather big into divination. Is that something you found yourself, I guess, kind of big into when you got into this stuff?
Oh yeah. I mean, I think I mentioned about Apollo and being the god of the oracular, that there's a sense for me of if I was to say like what archetype my spirit or my person here on earth now is connected to, it would be like the seer, prophetess, oracle. And that sounds kind of, you know, presumptuous, so I'm sorry if it comes off that way. But I mean, if we all had to sit down and say, this is my archetype, you know what I'm saying? Like, that's who I would say I was. Like, I'm connected to this inner exploration of how to direct your life and the symbols and the things that can come down into your life to guide you that way. And they will come from the gods, and they, like, I am writing a book called Emblemata and Symbola. And so I feel like they definitely are, you know, like manifestations that come into your life from the gods. And so that divination is just a way to express it. And I could easily go online and just, you know, do tarot readings for people, but I am more interested in art and writing, so creative writing. And so I like to express my interests that way. But yeah, I feel like I could, you know, like I do readings for people and I have gone to shows and things, but I primarily, it's just from, you know, helping friends or helping myself to just guide my way and, you know, my place in the world and how I fit in. And also, like, yeah, why am I here?
I really enjoy. Oh, sorry.
And I was gonna say, what can I offer? You know.
Yeah, I really enjoy your way of seeing this, and it's funny. My Kabbalah master explains as if like reality is a series of frames, like in a video, and then each frame you could see as like a tarot card. So like each, let's say now I'm this card, and then now I'm using this one, and so on and so on. So like you keep changing them. So when you make a reading, like when you take them out, it's basically seeing what it's inside of you, but in a table or whatever, that then you can rearrange and then rewrite maybe, or try to understand, like you're saying, like, who am I? What is this archetype that keeps coming? And I did an experiment, like I mentioned. I did 72 weeks reading, like making a reading per week. I would take 3 cards, and then after a couple of weeks, I started doing 1 per day as well. So in total it was like hundreds of cards. And I saw the statistics at the end, and it was very funny that the top 4 cards had to do with my astrology signs, like when you make correspondences. So then to me, that was, again, a sign where, okay, I'm usually tapping into those archetypes that make sense, like that they're talking about each other, like astrology and the tarot and so on. So then if I know that, then I know what are my strengths, my weaknesses, my shortcomings, what I'll be best at, and so on. So it's very, very nice way of seeing it, like we were talking about.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I like that connection.
Another thing I wanted to ask, I'm assuming, I could be wrong. I just know from my experience, even with, I guess, tarot too. Again, I really never had much of a clue, but just other stuff that I practiced. The way you looked at it at the beginning and the way you look at it now, is it kind of different? Have you kind of gone through?
Oh,
like
yeah.
Yeah. Is there any way maybe you could even give examples of that?
Trajectory.
Yeah.
What were you going to say?
Is it possible, like, I know I might be putting you on the spot, might be hard to even explain, but is there a way maybe you can even give examples, like how, like, I guess maybe your relationship with the cards have changed over time?
Yeah, well, like as I mentioned, I see the spirit that's behind it. So like I guess I call it like the spirit that presides over the deck, but I feel like I'm, kind of like when I'm sitting down, I'm not alone. And that these things are living beings. These cards are living beings. And, or even like I said, if I had my pendulum, not that I do a ton of work on my pendulum, I'm not just sitting here every day, like holding my pendulum, but like there are important times in my life, with certain questions and needs. But yeah, I think before, obviously when I was, my early days with tarot, it certainly enriched my life, but I didn't feel it was more like an addition to, my world, but like it wasn't my world. And so whenever I sit down with like tarot, this is like my story coming out, my mythos, as mentioned. And so it's almost like these beings are, whether they're like the daimon or like angelic intelligences or whatever they are, they're pushing that story through the cards for me, and it's up to me and my intellect to like connect in with it and see the signs and symbols and understand it and like interpret it. And so I didn't have that sense in my early days reading tarot. It was more just like, getting the booklet out and learning about it. But I think I did spend some time with like sort of a Jungian approach back then. I had a book that guided me that way. So I think that's why the hero's journey has always been kind of, like the Joseph Campbell, like kind of obsession that some people got into. I did fall into that in my early 20s. So yeah, I think now there's just way more of a sense of these are intelligences trying to communicate with me. How can I interpret them, bring them through that liminal threshold?
It's beautiful. I'm one of those Joseph Campbell fanatics, and it's in the beginning of A Hero with a Thousand Faces. He says the unconscious mind is like Aladdin's cave. It's got all these beautiful things and jewels and everything nice and pretty, but then when you get deep dark into it, they call it the jinn abide. There are many then both dark and scary and things that are going to bring up a lot of the shadow aspects of self. And what's so beautiful about the way you've kind of talked about the tarot is even when you start bringing it into the ideas of intelligences and archangels and these different things, which are just names depending upon what culture your nervous system is in. The beautiful thing about it is that the tarot is a living intelligence. And the more your nervous system and your brain and your body, mind, syzygy interact with it, the more you then can tap into the beautiful, right? The good, and these platonic forms that are then being expressed. And these forms have this egregoric style nature that then when you, through your nervous system, are playing with them or doing a reading, the more you've had the ability to touch and feel and be sensuous and have that that Orphic Eros coming through them and you. It's almost like you're becoming a swords master, right? The swords are now the cards, and they're not separate from you, but they are integrated. They are part of the hand. And so it's, And
I mean, you could even say like a wands master and a chalice master, a grail master, and like the pentacles can have, that symbolism as well. But yeah, no, that's really amazing. I definitely created the Odilon Radon deck, Tarot Chimera, as a shadow work, I guess you could say, deck, just because the fact that they're all noirs. I felt like that was sensible, and since it made sense to make that a deck to do deep dives with the subconscious and follow through that way. and I think the images touch you that way anyway. They're also kind of uncanny and funny, and like they're sublime in their own right. But yeah, that sense that he must have had of connected to spirit is so clear with those images. I keep wanting to say cards, but obviously it's artwork.
Yeah, his art is fantastic, and I like how you express them through the cards. So I like to see it. And when we talk about these things, it's like how many different angles and like models are we viewing reality through? But the major arcana are almost just, and even then minor arcana, they're just structures of existence, and each structure has a certain form, which then follows function. And so it's like once you get his nervous system and the way he perceives things, and then it's such a fascinating thing to see then how you've constructed the major arcana because it's like the major arcana is set, you know what I mean? It's like you have everything from the Fool to the Aeon, and you're then trying to build this beautiful thing off of it. Like you already have this idea set, and then how do we pull out through his work and you put it into that arcana? It's a beautiful deck.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I feel like sometimes I think to myself, like, gosh, I wish there was more, like there must be more than just, like the 22, because it feels like you could easily like sit down and figure out more major arcana that you could come up with,
It's true, but then we get into the problem of the postmodern chaos magicians, and then that problem is all of a sudden you get too erratic and you don't have a set structure, and then all of a sudden you're just fucking all over the place.
Now, Brandon, that is completely unfair. That feels like fighting words on Natasha's episode. So that is not true. I'm a very good Kabbalist, as you know, and there are 22 paths to the tree, and that is why there are 22 major arcana. So I want to say that. So
it's true.
Chaos can rap on this show. Just for the record.
No, it's true. And I have my own inner chaos magician, obviously, through my Hellenization of all the different things I do. So you're right. And I need individuals like yourself, Jen, to help pull me back. So thank you.
It feels nicely Saturnian to have that structure.
Yeah, it does. And that's my mercurialness nature. I can't help it. I want to put it all together into this neat little package through all the crazy chaos that
a really good chaos magician actually likes to work within boundaries, because it provides a useful framework for which to draw forth from the flux into something material. It's a true path working. It's like if you're willing to path working, chaos magic's for you. It's just that you have to take it with the limitations that it has. That's all.
No, that's beautiful. Yeah, you so elegantly always state these things, Jen, and I appreciate you thoroughly. Thank you.
Yeah, I used to integrate like chaos magic into my ritual work, but it was never like purely that. It's hard to explain. Like sigils and certain things. Like maybe I would do chaos magic with, like, you'll use that sigil and charge it, but it's because I'm using that for a ritual I'm going to do a few days later. That was never like the end all be all type. It's hard to explain.
I mean, I don't like to call my magic chaos magic per se, but it must obviously be, because I take in what makes sense to me and what works for me, and if it's from all different, any different traditions, that's awesome. And like I was saying, I haven't really gone down the deep dive of Kabbalah, and but I find that I don't want to limit myself. So, but I seek that wisdom from within. It's something that comes from within. It's not like, oh, that looks cool, I want to, explore that. That's something maybe I did do in my early days, but not later. Now I'm, it's what I call like my synchromistic path. It's like what comes to me that is symbolic and synchronicities. I can see things that start shaping up and they're presenting themselves to me. Like when I discovered that a couple of years ago, I discovered that Apollo and Athena have been in my life since I was a teen, or like an early teen, or maybe even like a little kid. But I didn't know that all through my 20s, 30s, and 40s, no joke. But when I now look at all these things throughout my life that have happened to me, And I can tie it all to either Apollo or Athena. And it's very interesting because I never said, oh, I want to, be a devotee of like Apollo or Athena, but that they have been like speaking to me all through these years in signs and symbols. And it just took a while before it like dawned on me.
Yeah.
and it was just like, I think it was because I started like magical thinking became who I am. I think I've always had like magical thinking, but I embodied it so much more in my late 40s when I could kind of like step back from mothering, basically, like get back into, all the sort of things that make me who I am, and not just like always pleasing my little ones and making their lives enchanting, and so, yeah, it was like very important to discover that there were particular gods on my side that I didn't even know were there. And now I'm certain they've been there,
Well, there's something interesting, actually, Nitasia, about what you just said in reference to Kabbalah, is that, first of all, you're past the age of 40. So you've crossed the threshold, you could say, into the Hasidic consciousness, that of Jupiter. Yeah. Jupiter is also a co-ruler of Uranus. You said you're an Aquarius. Well, the spirit of Aquarius is driven by the idea of justice. So that's also very Hasidic in a way. So there's a direct one-to-one kind of correspondence, and the Hierophant obviously occurs on that pillar, and that can be related to Neptune, but it can also, or Hokmah, but it can also be related to Gevra, which has a Mars, which has a very strong relationship with Jupiter or Hesed. So it's kind of like it's that priestly knowledge, that kind of thing that you're talking about, self-referential. You're like, your internal flame is kind of what guides you, your arrow with an A. So that kind of does actually directly correlate. And then there's an idea that the coming age will be a solar one, or will have a solar lunar synthetic element. So like a Apollo and an Athena, a son and a daughter. So that's kind of interesting, I think, just from like a speculative, like Gnostic perspective. And I think you're right. I think that's what it is about, is drawing from things that are meaningful, that make sense to you, and that are practical, that work. It's not just, we're not replicating Golden Dawn, ritual texts wholesale. We're looking at them in like terms of the whole landscape. So I think that if you want to call yourself a chaot, I think that's cool, but that's just me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess it's almost like it's hard not to be categorized in that chaos magic realm, especially since there are very few people who have been initiated through structural systems like the Golden Dawn. You know what I mean? And so we're all kind of just an amalgamorum of these teachings that have come down through time, and then trying to put them through our own nervous systems to understand our body mind.
Yeah, and I think a lot of what I'm trying to say too is like who I have become and who I am is, a lot of it's from DNA memory is what I call it, like cellular memory. And so it's like what I must have and could have easily been, because I'm absolutely, for me, certain that I've had past lives. And so I spend a lot of time thinking about and connecting in with past lives and the traditions that I may have followed then, and the initiations I may have had then. Yeah. And for instance, like I have a desire to move to Italy, but maybe potentially France, to study tarot more deeply from the early decks that were created in the Renaissance and early Renaissance and late medieval. Awesome. And so because I have direct correlations to certain like families from Italy and certain tarot tradition, not like tarot traditions, but tarot, like the Tarocchi and like the creators and the families that were making those. And I've had a lot of bizarre synchronicities come into my life about all of that. And so I just know that there's the stuff that touches my life. There's gnosis that touches my life from past life experiences. And I used to be really I felt funny talking about it with people, like constantly talking about past lives, until I discovered that the Greeks, that was, they had that word for it too. And it's
metempsychosis or transmigration.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
And with metempsychosis, like they were, it was completely normal and not abnormal to understand your, like, and if particularly, like you were saying, orphic initiate, which I'm certain that I, had some experience of that in a past life and probably was involved in some of the mysteries. And so that gnosis comes through, and, like I am a woman, so I suppose there's more of a sense of like that intuitive side. So it's like all of the magic that may seem like chaos magic that comes into my life can also not just be from things that I discovered in my teens and 20s and 30s, 40s, 50s, but like brought through from many generations and many lives and many weird experiences and things where I've had extreme trauma. In fact, I've talked about this on other podcasts, but I think that my road towards motherhood in this life was to blanket some of the traumas of past lives and to kind of keep at bay my magic. And once my kids were old enough, I was allowed to let it through. I was allowed to sort of step away and like let that like deep magic come out and not be so afraid of it because of experiences in past lives where it's probably, for me, it was strangled and drowned rather than burnt. But yes, those experiences I think are in our, bones and our like DNA history and like cellular stuff. So.
Yeah, nice.
Thank you. Judith, was there something you wanted to ask?
I did have a question. Because of your approach towards the way you develop these cards, I'm unfamiliar with it. And I could see the artistry work within the cards, but you also added literature. So I was wondering, to help those who are new to your approach in your decks, do you, how can I say, connect like a specific work of art, like a specific poem to each card to help like someone who gets your card connect with the vibe and the emotion and the feelings you're trying to invoke with it?
Yeah, so that was kind of why I got into creating tarot, because I've always loved poetry and I've always loved art. And I've always wondered how to combine the two. So I did book arts for a little while, but it never really, it just didn't sustain me. And it just wasn't like, I didn't want to keep just creating like standalone art books or whatever. So, but yeah, so I wanted to do more writing. That's why I went back to school for creative writing. And I wanted to then express the two together somehow. And tarot made sense because, you've got the interpretations alongside the card itself. And so I wanted mine to be definitely like poetic inspired. So whenever I write, it is a bit of like what someone might say channeling. I will do it from like the hero's journey kind of perspective. It's mythic, it's poetic, and it's magical minded, and I don't have a specific, like poem, but I have put poems together with tarot, like my Sublime Thresholds deck for each interpretation does have a poem from some other famous, like writer. But yeah, does that answer your question, or was there more you wanted me to explain?
Actually, it did, because I was trying to understand, since you don't use the Kabbalah and it's not the rune system, and you say you don't necessarily follow astrology too much. I was trying to put that together and see how to move forward when it comes to using your deck.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, all the decks I've created all have guidebooks that are extended, so not just the little white book that goes in the deck, but like creative interpretations that I've written that go with them. And that usually for my indie decks, they're separate books that I've published. And with the Wiser decks, they have them right in there with like a box set.
Yep, that's how it was, the one they sent me. Yep. Very nice. Something I wanted to ask you: what is different about Emblemata? Wait, sorry, how do you say that one again?
Emblemata?
Yeah, okay, I was right. What's like what's different about that deck? Like the reason, like normally when I ask people to write a book, like what were you bringing to the public that's different than everybody else who wrote on this topic? So you know what I'm saying, like kind of like the same thing with your tarot.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think for me, first and foremost, when I had seen a lot of the emblems floating around, like when I would go to Pinterest and just on the internet, and I'd always been drawn to them because they have that like iconic, they're black and white, they're iconic, and they are archaic, which has always interested me because there's a sense of the mystical and the metaphysical behind them, and obviously archetypal and symbolic. But it's for what I love about them is they are from the Renaissance, and there's a sense of Renaissance wisdom there. So there's it's like they're microcosms of something bigger, and they're emblematic, and they are they represent different things for the culture at the time, and they were for people who were both literate and illiterate, because people who could read the mottos, but people who couldn't read could look at the symbols and they could kind of guess and figure it out, But yeah, I think that with Renaissance wisdom, there's a sense of no separation of like spirituality and philosophy and science and theology. It was all kind of like together as one. At least that's how I interpret it. And so early science, obviously, but so things like astronomy and like music and painting and everything was kind of like combined into a philosophy. And so that's what I love about these emblems. And they're also, they're transcendent for me because, you can decode them of their clues, but I think that they speak for themselves just by looking at them. And they can be contemporary, even though they're ancient. Yeah, I think that's what makes them special. They were created in 1551. If you need to know the name of the person who curated these, it's Claude Perrodin and his book Devices Heroique. And there were many Emblemata books of the time. And I think there's something like 6,000. So yeah, it was pretty big back then. And they, I think, have a transcendent appeal. People do like to, obviously, when I saw these images, when I started looking at the whole book and seeing all these emblems, it was obvious that there were so many that related to the tarot and the traditional sort of Rider-Waite-Smith, or even some of them, I might say. So there's like the key, the crossed key, that made sense for the Hierophant. There was a lion with a sword that was obviously like perfect for the strength card. But more than obvious was there was so many that typical Rider-Waite-Smith, like arm holding a sword or a wand or a chalice or even a pentacle coming out of a cloud. That is the ace of swords, wands, pentacles, and cups, So it made sense to bring these and kind of revivify them and bring them out into the world in a unique and different way, and have them be attached to not only their mottos that are on the cards, but also write interpretations of them based on their, like, the inscriptio and the subscriptio of what was called the pictora, the emblem. And I think they're pretty magical.
Thank you. Is it all right? Unfortunately, because they did send me your other deck. Was it all right if maybe I showed some of the images of the Tarot Chimera? Just like
for sure.
Yeah, because I think some of this stuff is amazing. We have the Fool card and the Magician card and the Hierophant. Sorry, how do I change this? Oh, there we go. One thing I did want to ask you, I guess since I'm looking at it now, it reminded me. What was it that made you want to add those extra cards?
Because there were so many great images and I didn't want to stop.
Okay, all right. There you go.
And also because I'm not much I guess I'm getting a little more into it now, but I haven't always been really like big on oracle decks. But it was fun I think I'd gotten like the Pagan Otherworlds years ago, and I was like, they had that extra card and at the end, and I was like, oh, I'll do one. And so I did that one, the visionary one that you just showed, as like a Urania Press last card. For my indie deck, it actually has information written on it for, like Urania Press. But anyway, so yeah, I like wanted to keep doing more, but also it's fun to have a few oracle cards in there, and they make statements on their own.
These are pretty cool. In
fact, I could have done an entire oracle deck for more of Radon's work, but someone has already done that.
Beat you to it. They always give people an idea of what it looks like in the inside.
Yeah, it's got such like a haunting, beautiful aesthetic to it that is like, with the light and the dark, it's got such a like a phenomenological experience of how it makes you feel.
Yeah. Not that I know the way I explained it, probably like I wasn't knocking it, but I think yesterday when I mentioned that I thought we were gonna go live, which is no big deal. I was promoting the show already, and I said, "Yo, this art is pretty sick." I said it reminded me of that book. If people remember, More Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark as a child. That shit was always creepy to me, and I was like, "Yo, this art is sick."
Yeah, because it's the sublime and the surreal extend outside of our normal rational mind state. And so it's like when the shadows start to creep with the light, you see all kinds of different ghost-like apparatuses,
Yeah, like on the back of the this deck from Wiser, I give a quote from Radon, which was like that his imagery places, quote, the logic of the visible at the service of the invisible. And that I think is a really good one for his work, because the invisible, the noetic, the phenomenal, it comes out in that work. It's clear to me that he was connected to spirits.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it veers. What's interesting is how the aesthetic can still be sublime and beautiful and veer towards the grotesque. And I think a lot of people forget how the grotesque is something that is kind of mind bending, and also it interacts with your gut when you have certain experiences. And it's most of those experiences that are most paradigmatic or paradigm shifting for our consciousness.
Yeah, and I think that the chimera and the hybrid creature, I think, is important as a symbolic image to not forget, because we have, with too much new age stuff, just go too much into the light, and we've got to continue to be haunted by weird and the uncanny,
Yeah, that's
because
a great.
It helps us to think deeper about ourselves and relation to other, and relation to spirit.
Yeah, and totally understand the monster aspect of the human consciousness of our personhood. It's like I completely agree on how the new agey thing wants to be like love and light and it's all angels, and when it's like actually most of our mind is always taken up with the haunting and the emotional.
Yeah. And I mean, it pisses me off in a lot of ways, that whole kind of angels as, something derogatory, because angels originally even were like considered so frightening and so scary, and they were depicted as wheels with hundreds of eyes, and, it's just bizarre. So, I mean, the angelic, everything to me when it comes to all of this work, and also just my spiritual path, is about entity, deity, spirit, daimon, and that connection and that guidance. So whether it be angel or whatever.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, people forget kind of exactly what you just said is people forget that if you were to witness a god's true form or an angel's true form, it would destroy you.
Yeah. And I mean that, Gustave Moreau painting of Zeus with, is it Semele? She just like disintegrated because he had to show her his true form because she was tricked by Hera. But so that's an amazing painting and a great story. But I think that we could probably never truly see them, but that's why we have symbols and all of this art, and that's what really pisses me off about like the Reformation and all of that was iconoclasm and like smashing the icons and everything, because to me it's what art is all about. Is we're as human beings, we were, I think, taught by the angels this stuff, and I think it's important. And even if it's a fallen thing, it's a really creative and good thing.
Yeah, nice. That leads back into like how we were talking before about Scarlet Imprint and what Peter Gray was trying to get at with his Lucifer Praxis,
so good.
Which is a brilliant, they're brilliant. And it's the idea of like the magic and the mysticism was taught to us by those fallen angels. And how that has moved through it. And if you are a magician or a mystic or somebody, we are the rebels exploring the unconscious realms of not only the world, but the world that is the phantasmical. We like going outside into the dark with little flashlights and looking, and the flashlight is what creates then kind of like images that you're putting into that deck.
Yeah, that's why I'm really into Prometheus, because of the idea of like, in a way, he's like what the angels did. He fell, what I mean, and brought the light and the wisdom, And
I love Prometheus too. Yeah. And I just want to challenge Brandon and say that you're not against you're pro Archon if you are not a little bit of chaos.
No, for sure.
You have to, that's why we have to have those like, wild and weird syncretic elements to sort of like, rock and roll. We don't want to keep the heavens the same. We want to like bring the light down here. Like Nitasia said.
No, I completely agree. And I'm definitely pro Archon. It's such a fascinating world, what's happened in the taking of the Gnostic or understandings of even what an Archon is and how we like epitomize it up and then we want to always destroy them. But Ike actually said it really nicely. I think it was in your guys' conversation with him and Jamie Paul Lamb in talking about how these Archons are actually gatekeepers or guardians of certain levels of consciousness as we reach paradigmatic movements in our own like ascent towards the stars.
That's an interesting Hellenic way that I strongly disagree. And I told that I disagree with that. That's not a tantric way. That's not a Buddhist way to describe it, right?
Of course not.
But it's one way. It's an interesting way that I've heard people from that system describe it. And I'm more about like, I think the Archons are sort of our fears and projections, our klipas, our aggregations. I think that's what more it's about. So I think if we want to behead them, I think that's totally okay.
Yeah, I think that's important as well, which is why the rebel nature kind of comes out, and probably why we agree on so much is that they're important to stand. It's like, what are we but representations of exactly the fears that we project outward, Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah, I would like to, I've been putting on the back burner a book that would explore further about my conceptions of Archons, so I'm not going to get into that right now because that's like for the back burner, but for kind of like me trying to understand why the world is so fucked up and why there's so much evil and how this research would include everything and anything to do with fallen angels, Archons, Sophia, wisdom, primordial man, and then how, like before the flood, and to understand if there was a golden age, how that golden age could come back into play and what we could do now to kind of like take steps towards it and help along,
Cultivate your own mind. Number one.
Nailed it, Jen. That's the number one thing.
We're in a silver age, Nitasia. That's how I've posited it. Yeah. So we're in a silver age. So this is a time to cultivate your own mind, cultivate your psychic powers, if you want to call it that.
Yeah.
That's how you move the age forward. The age moves forward whether we know it or not, whether we're in perception or not. The aeons continue.
Yeah.
The wheel moves. So we have to be in perception of it and then also enact those things that are aeonic. Those things, those archetypal things that will help us move through. That's kind of a neo-Gnostic way to think of it.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. That's the self-mythologizing, understand how embodiment and practice and interact in the world. It's not so much going out in the world and trying to do things, but it's like sitting down with your own reflections and contemplations. And at the same time, try to like harmonize with the inner like king, queen, lover, warrior, magician, poet type of personas that are continually interacting through the cards themselves, it seems like.
But also, like, you know, that's why I'm writing that book on Synthemata and Symbola, because I feel like we are not alone. We have the gods trying to tell us this stuff day and night, and they maybe even, like you could say, angelic intelligences in the daimon. Day and night, every day of the week, every hour, you know? And they're just there and ancestors. And we're not alone in trying to figure out this stuff. And so, yeah, you need quietude, you need self-reflection in order to hear what they're trying to say and interpret it. Or, you know, if not hear it, because I'm a clairaudient, that's the only well, I mean, I think I'm quite intuitive, but I'm definitely clairaudient. So I actually do, when I sit and meditate, have voices come through, but not very often. But when they do, it's like, oh my God. You know, sometimes there's one that literally screams, like it's like this thunderous voice. And that may, you know, suddenly make me sound kind of crazy. But no, it's nothing like that.
You're the right spot for crazy.
Totally.
Yeah, you're safe. This is a safe space.
Yeah, so totally. Definitely you guys are the others, finding the others. So yeah, I think that we're not alone in trying to figure out all this stuff. And so there are ways to interpret it through just connection to spirit.
What's fascinating is I was just thinking about it because right now I'm an anime nerd. I don't know if you know that, but I'm an anime nerd, and there's an anime out there called JJK, and there's these cursed spirits in JJK. But what some of the and it made me think of it because of what Jin said is that we're trying to cultivate our own internal power to be able to move through the world, that kind of thing. And those some of those images that you've put into that last tarot deck we were looking at actually look like something like they call Shikigami. And it's some of those characters have the ability to take in these like cursed spirits that have a negative connotation, but use them for positive light, or like a positivity in battle. And so in a lot of anime, it's like you're always battling the evil doers. But if you take that and you like personalize that, it's like, how can I use these cursed spirits, right? And I don't want to like interact and like make it seem like I'm talking about like the Goetia or something like that.
I was just going to say it sounds grimoire, but
it
you know,
does.
like with the binding, you know, of the spirit and the demon. But
and the only reason I wasn't wanting to link it to that was just because it's got such awful connotations at time in different things. But that's exactly what it is. You're binding these spirits, and certain families and lineages have the ability to use these curse techniques to be able to bind them and then use them at their will. And then, interesting enough, if they're destroyed in battle, they're actually like completely destroyed in that. But it's an interesting how to use like modern myths, like I would call a lot of these like things that are coming out in the anime world, comic book world, and those different things for positive reinforcement of understanding your inner fears. Mm-hmm. You know, and I think what's cool about the decks that you're producing is that then you are able to put them, you're illustrating something that most people will never see, like, you know, like the Roland work and these different things. And now they are out in the social cultural area where you can just buy them and then play with them and then have a conversation with them.
Yeah, I love that this ended up being a mass market deck just because, you know, it's wonderful to like, because I loved it as a more indie esoteric feel when I created it, but to think that they wanted to put that out there mass market was exceptionally cool because they're dark and I love dark stuff. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's dark but enlightening at the same time. It lets that chink, that's that little chink that lets the light in. That's what these images are for me.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Jin or Matt, did you guys have anything else that you wanted to ask, talk about? All right, we're almost at an hour and a half. I think maybe we could wrap it up here. Is there anything, Nitasia, that you wanted to add or say before, about your deck or anything before we wrap it up?
Let's see. Well, right now the Sublime Thresholds Tarot is just in its second printing, and so that's still available as a late pledge on Kickstarter or for Etsy pre-order. But otherwise, I think we've kind of gone into what I've put out there, a few of them anyway. And I would love it if people wanted to check me out on Instagram and see more of what I do. I will put that in the show notes, right? And I thank all of you. It's been really fun exploration, and it's great to see you. And I hope we can go further down the road sometime. I'm going to be putting that Synthemata and Symbola book out at some point. Okay. So, maybe we can get together again.
Oh, no, definitely. I would like to definitely have another conversation with you in the future. I know we kind of talked about it a little bit now, but even in the future, if you wanted to come back for the deck that they did send me, we could get a little bit more into that, actually. So that's always a possibility. But yeah, sure. We'll definitely keep in touch. Thank you very much for coming on. That really was an awesome chat. I really had a lot of fun. That was very interesting. Again, I'm not too much into tarot, so it was nice hearing your take on it and stuff.
Appreciate it so much.
Yes. And before we wrap it up, I guess we'll have everybody real quick just plug their stuff again. Judith, if you're there, would you like to plug your show?
Sorry about that. Natasha, it was very nice meeting you and hearing your perspective on the tarot. It was very enlightening for me. You could catch me on The Loon on YouTube and on X as The Loon. Thank you very much again for having me.
Of course, Judith. No, thank you for coming on. And we got Jin the Ninja, Friday Jin.
Thank you so much, boss. I'll just say thank you so much, Nitasia. It was awesome. It's cool because even though I said I wasn't into tarot and I'm not really, it's good for me to hear people like you who aren't so fixed to the traditional system is what I also think what Nick was saying. So you can think expansively about it and you can be like, yeah, okay, maybe I'm not that great at it. Maybe I don't know that much about it, but there's nothing wrong with playing with the deck. There is nothing wrong with seeing how the archetypes fit or what you sort of attribute to the traditional depictions. So
I think that's super important. Thank you.
No, so that definitely shook me up. So thank you so much. Appreciate that. And then of course, what do I do? Okay, so I have Threshold Saints. You can check that out. Spotify and Apple. 2 episodes with Sochki, who is he developed a quantum crystal computer based on 90s technology. So it's very exciting time. And he's a Kabbalist and a musician and artist and a true anime nerd. And we talked about everything from Gaunt's to Gunpla to everything. So basically you can check those out. That'll be dropping next week. And then we'll probably have a Grey Lodge again. We just had one, but we'll probably have one this coming Friday as well. Even if it's just me or just me and Matt or just me and Joshua or whomever, it'll still be cool. And so thank you guys. And I always appreciate doing these roundtables. I think it's really fun and expansive.
Yeah, no, definitely had a good time. And Matt, real quick, I know you got to bounce. I just realized that now because perfect timing to wrap it up.
Yes. So, Natasia, very nice to meet you. Very nice to hear from your perspectives. And as always, I love talking about tarot, so that was really fun. And yeah, you can always find me as @Metmore19 on all socials. That's going to be X, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, Telegram, Twitch, maybe some other place. There's also my website. That's going to be Kabbalah.com, KAABALAH.com. You can find out what I do there, services, apps, anything else. Also, you can just chat with me through the website now. There's a little pop-up thing. It reaches my DM, so I can answer pretty quickly, actually. So anything, just let me know through there or through the other websites.
Thank you very much, Matt. Always appreciate you jumping on the show. And last but not least, Brandon, please let everybody know what's up.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you for always having me on, Nick. I truly appreciate it. This place is amazing. A round table of like minds and also minds that are different, which is then how you actually can move the needle a little bit in this strange world. And Nitasia, it was amazing to meet you. Your work and putting these things out here. I think it's a net positive for the community as well as the world.
So much appreciated. Thanks, Brandon.
Yeah, of course. It's fantastic. And good luck in continuing that. And everyone out there, when you're listening to this, make sure you, after looking through all the beautiful things that Nick has produced in Occult Rejects, make sure to head on over to Magus in the Media, where we break down all of the things that need to be broken down in such a beautiful way of the esoteric, mythological, and philosophical. I've got all the stuff. So go to your TikToks and your X's and your EG or IG or Instagrams or whatever it is. And we're trying to do the thing. Thank you so much for this beautiful moment.
Of course. Thank you, man. I gotta definitely leave you for the last guy now. Well, that was amazing. Thank you. You promoted my stuff more than I do. Thanks.
That's what I'm here for.
Yeah. Nitasia, thank you so much for coming on again. Like, I really had a good time. It was awesome talk, and hopefully we have more in the future. And I guess that is the end of another Occult Rejects. And until the next one, everybody be well. Later.
Thank you.